Hey folks, Hal Shurtleff here with Camp Constitution. We are here on George's Island in Boston Harbor, June 20th, 2018, and you're looking at the Boston skyline from my vantage point. Over here, the Visitor Center, and there you see Pettick's Island. And this was used as a Confederate prisoner of war camp, and you're looking up here at the granite fortress here was Fort Warren, and actually been used from the Civil War to World War II, even a little after World War II, where it became somewhat obsolete. But during the Civil War, it was used for training Union soldiers. In fact, the Webster Regiment, which a regiment that one of my ancestors served in, was trained here. And the song John Brown's Body, it was in part by one of the soldiers in his regiment, John Brown. And in the 4 years of the Civil War, or 5 years, there were over 2,200 prisoners, Confederate prisoners, including the Vice President of the Confederacy, Alexander Stephens, obviously a little after the war. And the commandant from 1861 to 1863 was Justin Dimmock, Colonel Justin Dimmock, and he was up in years, and he was sort of his last assignment before his retirement. And he led a very it was very humane treatment of the prisoners. Now, there weren't 2,200 here at all times. Some of the prisoners were paroled, which meant that they pledged not to take up arms against the Union. So they'd go back to their homes, but and they used to honor those agreements in those days. And then there was also some prisoner exchanges earlier in the war. They did that, and those men could rejoin their units or re-enlist. And 12 men died here. 12 Confederate prisoners died here, which is a pretty good track record considering, all the people that were here and the fact that, diseases and ailments were unfortunately common in those days. There were other Union prisoner of war camps that weren't nearly as good, including Elmira, New York, which was a horrible camp. There was very, very high casualties, and the prisoner of war camp at Rock Island, Illinois, which is has a horrible reputation. Although most people who read history books know about Andersonville, but they don't know much about the terrible conditions at the Union camps. But anyway, in the early 1960s, a chapter of the Daughters of the Confederacy, the Boston chapter, which is now defunct, donated, with the approval, no doubt, of the people that were caretaking this island, the state of Massachusetts, the governor, who was a liberal Democrat. They agreed to have this monument put here to simply mark the name of the men who died here. Now, there is a friend of mine said that there are some of them that are buried here, and I asked a few of the rangers, and one said they didn't know, and the other one said no, they're not buried here. So they may be buried here. If that's the case, it's an unmarked grave site with a marker. Should be by law. The U.S. government is obligated to have a marker for their, even if their remains aren't here, if their remains are unknown places or buried at sea, etc. Anyway, so from 1963, there's a granite marker. If you go, I'm going to put a couple of pictures in the beginning of the video. I've got a couple of the pictures, and then at the end. But last year, 2017, it was in the spring, all of a sudden some social justice warriors saw this horrible Confederate monument, and it was time to get it removed. And it didn't take long. When you try to get something done at the state level, it sometimes takes forever. But when it comes to something like this, oh boy, Charlie Baker, Mr. Jellyfish, quickly acquiesced. In fact, he probably could care less. He probably looked like he was scoring some points. Initially, they put plywood around it. We couldn't even look at it. It was so repugnant to see. After 50 plus years being here, then all of a sudden, oh my goodness, we never knew it was there. And they covered it with plywood, and there's pictures of the marker with plywood. They removed the marker, and no doubt it's at some expense. It's probably a ton or two of granite, and it's currently being stored at the Mass Archives just across the harbor here in Dorchester. And I'm telling you, I've been trying to get information on it. I called my state rep, I called my state senator, I visited the governor's office, I called the Mass Archives. I finally got a chance, someone finally spoke to me about it. They just don't want to deal with this. it's a hot potato, I think, because I believe they know the law has been violated, and they don't want to deal with it. So anyway, the woman, young lady that I spoke to, said that they tried to find the folks who gave them the marker, but the organization is defunct, so there aren't any records available of where it could go. So there it is, sits in the Mass Archives. And so I called and I said, I'm interested in receiving it. However, I think it should be put back in its proper place right here in George's Island. Right now there's a couple of school groups here, elementary, I think maybe junior high, and they're missing out on some important history. And if you walk through the fort, you're going to see markers, historic markers of Confederates that stayed here, where the two men involved in the Trent affair, Mason and Slidell, were housed, and where Alexander Stephens was housed. So all of this is history, and I think it should be known that here are the names of the 12 men who died here. Nothing on the marker says the South shall rise again, or we're going to bring back slavery, or down with blacks. Nothing like that. And by the way, if you go to the Daughters of the Confederacy website, you'll see that they pledge allegiance to the United States flag. This organization that goes back to the 1880s, early 1890s. They raised money for bond drives in World War I and World War II. And there were Confederate soldiers, that even a few that fought in the Spanish-American War, and definitely the sons and daughters and grandsons and daughters fought in these wars, and great-grandsons. In fact, today's military is largely comprised of people from the southern states. And this is how we treat them, folks. We destroyed the memory of the men that died, their ancestors that died here. So we're hoping that we're going to make hay of this. If you're watching this video, please share it, and maybe make your own comments about it. We want to put pressure on not just Charlie Baker, but also the Massachusetts legislature, the Massachusetts Archives, Secretary of State of Massachusetts, and either get this marker back up or donate it to Camp Constitution. Well, we will make sure that the history is not put on Orwellian memory hole. And by the way, I also want to point out too that CAIR, the Center for American and Islamic Relations, is in favor of dismantling Confederate monuments. And you might say, well, why would they want to do that? Why would they even care? No pun intended. Well, when Muslims come to a country and start to dominate that culture, they destroy any history of that country. And that's why it's important to them. So again, please contact me, and if you're interested in contacting officials here, if you live in Massachusetts, contact your state rep, state senator. Just go online and put their name in there, and or go to their Facebook page or what have you and say, put the marker back. With that, I want to thank you. If you want to learn more about Camp Constitution, please visit us on our website, campconstitution.net.